The rain never stopped the entire drive to Black Hollow County. It slammed against the windshield so hard that Mia Calder could barely see the road ahead, and every mile deeper into the forest made the world feel emptier. The GPS signal vanished nearly half an hour earlier, leaving the three friends alone on twisting roads lined with dead pine trees and abandoned telephone poles leaning at crooked angles. Noah Price kept trying to joke about the situation, pretending the isolation felt adventurous instead of disturbing, while Lena Ortiz recorded pieces of the trip for her vlog, laughing about the unbelievably cheap Airbnb they had managed to find at the last second. $80 for 3 nights in the middle of peak autumn season should have been impossible. But the listing had appeared suddenly online that same afternoon with only a blurry photo of a cabin hidden among trees. No views. No owner profile. No description beyond a single sentence. A quiet retreat for guests seeking peace. At the time, it had sounded mysterious. Now it felt like a warning. The cabin finally appeared at the end of a narrow dirt path surrounded by dense wood so thick they blocked most of the moonlight. The structure looked much older than it had in the pictures. The wood along the outside walls sagged inward as though the entire building had been slowly rotting from the inside for decades. One upstairs window was cracked badly, and a rusted swing hanging from a nearby tree creaked back and forth despite the complete absence of wind. Even before stepping out of the car, Mia felt something heavy settle into her chest. Not fear exactly. Something worse. A feeling that they had already made a terrible mistake simply by arriving there. The front door stood slightly open. No light shone inside. No sounds came from the forest around them. Only silence, the kind of silence that feels unnatural. Inside, the cabin smelled of damp wood, mildew, and something sour hidden beneath layers of artificial lavender spray. The electricity barely worked. Several dim lamps flickered weakly from an old generator outside that sputtered every few seconds like it might die completely at any moment. Noah tried making jokes to calm everyone down, but his voice echoed strangely through the cabin. The sound didn't fade naturally. It seemed to linger too long, almost as if someone deeper inside the house had repeated his words quietly after him. Lena found an old guestbook sitting alone on the dining table. Most of the pages had been violently ripped out. Only the final page remained. Across the paper, written in jagged black press so hard it nearly tore through the surface, were 6 chilling words. Don't let her fall asleep alone. The room instantly felt colder. Mia wanted to leave immediately. Every instinct inside her screamed that something was wrong with the place. But the storm outside had grown too dangerous, their phones had completely lost signal, and the nearest motel was over an hour away through roads that were already flooding. So they stayed. And sometime after midnight, while the storm shook the cabin walls and branches scraped against the windows like fingernails, Lena woke to the sound of someone whispering her name directly beside her ear. Lena opened her eyes slowly, still trapped halfway between sleep and consciousness, but the whisper came again instantly. Closer this time. Lena? The voice sounded wrong. Wet. Uneven. Like someone speaking while drowning. Her entire body froze beneath the blankets. The room around her was pitch black except for thin grey moonlight slipping through the torn curtains. She reached shakily for her phone and turned on the flashlight, sweeping the beam across the empty room. No one stood beside her bed. No shadows moved near the doorway. But the moment the light reached the ceiling, her stomach twisted violently. Long scratch marks covered the wood directly above her. Fresh scratch marks. Tiny splinters drifted slowly downward onto her blanket. Then came the dragging sound. Heavy. Slow. Something was crawling above her head inside the attic. Lena ran from the room immediately and pounded on Noah's door so hard she nearly broke her hand. Noah reluctantly followed her upstairs with a flashlight while Mia waited nervously near the staircase below. The attic entrance hung from the hallway ceiling with a rope handle dangling down into darkness. Noah pulled it slowly. The attic door creaked open. And the smell hit them instantly. Rotting flesh. Decay so strong it burned their throats. Noah climbed only halfway into the attic before suddenly freezing completely. The flashlight trembled violently in his hand. Mia whispered from below, asking what he saw. For several seconds, Noah couldn't answer. Then he climbed back down, pale and sweating. "There are dead animals up there," he finally muttered. "Dozens of them. Birds. Foxes. Maybe dogs." Something nailed them to the walls. Before anyone could process what he said, a deafening slam exploded above them. The attic door had shut by itself. Then came the laughter. Not from the attic. From inside the walls, soft at first. Then growing louder. Dozens of overlapping voices whispering and giggling throughout the cabin as though people were trapped inside the wood itself. Lena backed against the wall, trembling while the laughter spread through every room around them. And somewhere deep inside the house, something began moving. Morning should have brought relief. Instead, the cabin somehow felt even worse in daylight. The storm had passed, but thick fog surrounded the woods in every direction, making the forest look endless. Noah discovered their car battery had completely died overnight despite everything being turned off. The dashboard flickered weakly before going black again. Mia insisted they leave on foot. But before they could even start walking, Lena noticed someone standing near the edge of the trees. An elderly woman. Completely still. She wore a long black coat hanging loosely from her thin body, and her pale face looked stretched tightly against sharp bones beneath her skin. She stared directly at the cabin without blinking once. Mia cautiously approached her, calling out for help. The old woman ignored the question entirely. "You shouldn't have entered that house," she whispered. Her voice sounded dry and fragile, yet somehow carried clearly through the fog. Noah asked if she lived nearby. Again, she ignored him. Instead, her eyes slowly shifted toward the upstairs window of the cabin. "She likes lonely people," the woman murmured. "She takes lonely people first." The air suddenly felt freezing. The old woman explained that decades earlier, a young girl named Evelyn had died inside that very cabin during a brutal winter storm. Her father had locked her inside alone for days while he disappeared into town drunk. By the time he returned, the child had frozen to death hidden beneath the floorboards. According to local stories, Evelyn spent her final hours praying desperately for someone to save her. But no one came. Now, the woman claimed, the girl's spirit remained trapped there. Not alone anymore. Never alone anymore. The trees behind the old woman began shaking violently despite the complete lack of wind around the cabin itself. Then she looked directly at Lena. "She's already chosen one of you." The words hung in the air like a curse. And before any of them could react, the woman stepped backward into the fog and vanished silently into the woods. The change inside Lena began slowly enough that at first nobody wanted to admit something was wrong. She became quieter during the afternoon, wandering aimlessly through the cabin, touching the walls with her fingertips as if listening to something hidden beneath them. Occasionally she whispered under her breath in a language none of them recognized. Her movement seemed slower. Stiffer. Her eyes looked darker somehow, the pupils spreading unnaturally wide whenever the lights flickered. At dinner, Mia noticed dirt packed beneath Lena's fingernails. Wet dirt. Like she had been digging somewhere. But Lena insisted she hadn't left the cabin. That night, Noah woke suddenly to violent choking sounds coming from the kitchen. He rushed downstairs and found Mia pinned against the wall while Lena held her throat with terrifying strength. Lena's face looked twisted, almost stretched unnaturally tight across her skull. Her jaw hung too wide as she hissed through clenched teeth. "She told me your secrets." Mia clawed desperately at Lena's hands while Noah pulled her away with all his strength. Lena barely reacted. Her skin felt ice cold. Then suddenly her entire body went limp. She collapsed unconscious onto the floor. When Lena finally woke an hour later, she remembered absolutely nothing. That was when Mia finally confessed the truth she had hidden for years. She and Lena had once been inseparable friends during college, but after a terrible betrayal and years of silence, they stopped speaking entirely. This trip had been Mia's attempt to repair their friendship before Lena moved overseas forever. But the entity inside the cabin knew things nobody else could possibly know. Private guilt. Private pain. Private regrets. It was feeding on them. studying them, learning exactly how to hurt them. And Lena was becoming weaker every hour the basement door appeared after midnight. That was impossible. All three of them swore the hallway wall had been completely solid earlier that evening. But now, hidden behind peeling wallpaper near the staircase, stood a narrow wooden door covered in rusted chains. Lena stared at it immediately. "She's down there," she whispered softly. The chains suddenly dropped to the floor by themselves. Noah grabbed the lantern while Mia tried convincing everyone to stay upstairs, but the darkness beyond the door felt almost magnetic. The staircase descended much farther underground than the cabin size should have physically allowed. The wooden walls gradually changed into ancient stone slick with black mold and moisture. Children's drawings littered the floor. Stick figures. Shadow creatures. A little girl crying beside a bed. At the bottom of the stairs sat a rusted iron bed frame. And on top of it rested a small human skeleton wearing a faded blue dress. Lena approached slowly, tears filling her eyes. She was alone, she whispered. Then the lantern went out. Total darkness swallowed them instantly. Breathing echoed around the basement. Not one person breathing. Many. Dozens. Then came the whispers. Soft overlapping voices from every direction. "Stay with us." Hands emerged from the darkness. Cold hands. Decayed hands. They grabbed Noah violently and dragged him screaming backward across the stone floor while Mia desperately tried pulling him free. Lena stood completely still beside the skeleton, smiling faintly as shadows crawled upward along her skin like black veins. When the lantern finally flickered back to life, Noah was gone. Mia searched the woods until sunrise. She screamed Noah's name until her throat burned raw, but the forest only answered with silence. The deeper she wandered among the trees, the stranger the woods became. Branches bent at impossible angles. Human-shaped figures appeared briefly between the fog before disappearing again. Every direction somehow led her back toward the cabin no matter how far she walked. And when she finally returned, Lena sat calmly at the kitchen table waiting for her. Except it wasn't truly Lena anymore. The voice that came from her mouth sounded layered with something ancient and hollow. "She doesn't want you to leave." Mia backed away. Slowly. "Where's Noah?" A smile spread across Lena's face. "Under the house." At that exact moment, every light inside the cabin exploded simultaneously. Glass shattered across the floor. Lena's body jerked violently upward, levitating several inches above the ground while bones cracked loudly beneath her skin. Thick black liquid spilled from her mouth onto the wooden boards. "She cried for days before she died," the entity growled through Lena's voice. Nobody came. Dark stains spread across the walls like bleeding mold. The front door wouldn't open. The windows sealed shut beneath layers of black rot growing unnaturally fast. Then Lena dropped onto all fours and crawled toward Mia in horrifying jerking movements, limbs twisting like a spider. "She says you abandon people too." Mia froze completely. Because it was true. Years earlier, her younger brother had called her repeatedly during one terrible night while struggling with addiction. Angry after another argument, Mia ignored every call. By morning, he was dead. The entity knew. It had searched through every buried guilt hidden inside her soul. And now it wanted her to suffer forever. The cabin became silent again by sunrise. Hours later, a passing highway patrol officer noticed smoke rising through the trees near Black Hollow County and followed the dirt path toward the property. The front door hung wide open. Inside, the cabin looked destroyed. Furniture had been overturned. Deep claw marks covered the walls. Several rooms were stained black from floor to ceiling. But no bodies were found. No Noah. No Mia. No Lena. Only a camera resting near the staircase. Most of the footage had been corrupted by static and distorted sound, but investigators recovered the final recording. The video showed Mia standing alone in the living room crying uncontrollably while Lena sat motionless in the corner facing the wall. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then Lena slowly turned her head. Her eyes were completely black. And in a voice layered with dozens of whispering voices speaking together, she smiled and said, "She needs more guests." The recording ended instantly afterward. 3 weeks later, a brand new Airbnb listing appeared online. A cozy woodland retreat. Perfect for quiet weekend stays. Cheap price. No reviews. And hidden faintly in the upstairs window of the listing photos stood the shadow of a young girl smiling in the dark.